Okay, fantastic. Looks like we're recording. Yes, okay. So good morning, nice to see all of you. My name is Megan Nyes. I'm a hearing officer with the State Water Resources Control Board's Administrative Hearings Office. As you all know, this is a hearing on the pending application of the City of Stockton application 30531B for a permit to appropriate wastewater from the San Joaquin River, originating from wastewater discharges by the city. This hearing is being held in accordance with the notice of public hearing and pre-hearing conference dated August 16th, 2021, and the hearing issues are identified in that notice. This hearing is being conducted by Zoom web conference and is also being broadcast live on the AHO YouTube channel. Both audio and video are being recorded, and we will post files of this recording along with the Zoom generated transcript to the AHO FTP website. There's no court reporter, so the official record today will be our recording that we've posted to the AHO FTP site. The YouTube recording, which may be helpful, but is not going to be the official record today, that recording will be available on the AHO YouTube page. Now, I know it's a little rainy out, so that may affect internet today, and I have seen a few connections kind of flickering in and out. So if you're experiencing any technical difficulties trying to communicate with us, you can send us an email to the AHO at adminhearingoffice@waterboards.ca.gov, and our staff will be monitoring the AHO inbox. So the staff who's assisting us today, Nicole Mullen, Amy Blanc, Skylar Anderson, and Kyle Woldridge, and I thank them very much for their support. I think many of you have appeared before our office before, so you know that our standard practice is for Ms. Mullen to handle the screen sharing of exhibits. So if you're a witness, you may simply ask Ms. Mullen to advance to a different exhibit or a different portion of the written testimony. And then attorneys, you may ask Ms. Mullen to directly to bring up an exhibit if you wish to use it as part of your questioning. If I'm experiencing any technical difficulties today and I'm not able to rejoin the Zoom conference, within a few minutes, one of my staff will call a recess and we'll wait a few moments until I'm able to join you. So that's all the business for this morning. Let's move on to appearances. To do that, I'm going to identify each of the entities that's filed an NOI who plan to participate today, either by presenting a case in chief or by cross-examination. And if you're representing that entity today, please unmute your microphone, go on camera if you're able to, and then identify yourself. So, City of Stockton, good morning.
Good morning, Aaron Ferguson for the City of Stockton. I'll let my colleague introduce herself.
Good morning, Kelly Tabor, also for the City of Stockton.
Great, good morning. And Mr. Ferguson, will you be taking the lead this morning?
Yes, I will.
Okay.
And we have two witnesses from the City of Stockton as well, and I'll let them introduce themselves.
Good morning, I'm Dr. Mel Lytle. I'm Director of Municipal Utilities for the City of Stockton.
Good morning.
And good morning, I'm Robert Granberg. I'm assisting the City of Stockton today.
Great, good morning, thank you.
Good morning.
San Luis and Delta Mendota Water Authority.
Good morning, Carissa Beecham, appearing for San Luis and Delta Mendota Water Authority.
Good morning. Department of Water Resources.
Good morning, Eric Soderlin on behalf of the Department of Water Resources.
Thank you, good morning. Westlands Water District.
Yes, good morning. My name is John Rubin. I'm Assistant General Manager and General Counsel for Westlands Water District.
Good morning, thank you. I like your background, no rain for you today.
Unfortunately, this was taken some years ago. Doesn't reflect conditions this summer.
Now I'm looking at my screen. Did I miss anyone who will be presenting a case in chief or participating by cross-examination? Okay, so now I'm going to move on to the entities who will be presenting a policy statement from whom I have received a notice of intent to appear. So that's the Contra Costa Water District.
Doug Cody appearing for Contra Costa Water District, District's General Counsel. We did provide a written policy statement. We don't plan on supplementing that today.
Okay, thank you. Did you, because I did check our FTP site, was that up and I didn't see it there. Was that sent by email to our AHO inbox?
It was, and it was a joint one. I would have to look up and see who was the entity that submitted that directly.
Okay, we will look for it and just double check that we have it. Thank you for letting us know. So you're not planning to deliver any oral comments today?
Not today, thank you.
Okay, fantastic, thank you. And then is there anyone else who has not identified themselves who plans to present an oral policy statement this morning or otherwise participate? Restore the Delta. Yes, good morning.
Good morning. I'm Tim Stroshane. I'll be giving a policy statement.
Okay,
Let me know when.
I will do that. Fantastic. And then is there anyone else? Ms. Zolezi, I see that you're on the call. Would you like to make an appearance today?
No, thank you, hearing officer. We are just listening. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Can I clarify the role that I anticipate today for Westlands Water District?
Yes, please.
I know that we submitted a notice of intent that preserved our the ability to cross-examine witnesses. At this point, we don't anticipate doing that. I anticipate today that our role will be limited to a very short policy statement.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Hearing officer, this is Carissa Beecham. It will be the same for us. We'll present a brief opening statement and not likely engage in cross-examination.
Okay, so for both of you though, because this is a good lawyerly phrase, you said you're not likely to ask any cross-examination questions. I was still planning to ask you if you have
At the time.
cross-examination. Okay, and then you can just, if you change your mind, you can tell me, but I'll still ask you just to make sure I've covered my bases this
Thank
morning.
you.
Okay, great. Any other matters to address before we move on to policy statements? Okay, so I'd like to start with the parties that will be participating, and Ms. Beecham, you've just indicated that the San Luis and Delta Mendota Water Authority will be one of those parties. So I'm going to ask all the parties who are participating by potential cross-examination or just offering a policy statement only to present those policy statements. So as you know, those should be about 5 minutes or less. So this can be an opening statement or a policy statement from parties who potentially will participate in cross-examination. So Ms. Beecham, I'll start with you with the San Luis and Delta Mendota Water Authority. If you have a policy statement / opening statement, this would be a great time to provide it.
Yes, and good morning again. This is Carissa Beecham on behalf of the Water Authority. So the present application has been pending for decades, and the city has indicated that it will be decades more before its environmental review in support of the application is commenced. Environmental review, which is necessary for the city to decide whether to approve the project. After that time, the city could decide not to pursue the project. There are policy implications to allowing an application to remain on file for decades with no indication of progress or other efforts to move the application forward. Others that filed an application later in time may be prejudiced. Regulatory conditions, system demands, and additional relevant circumstances change. Staff turns over and institutional knowledge is lost. The effort by all interested parties to remain informed of the issues relevant to the application can be overly burdensome. Presumably for these reasons, the California legislature authorized the State Water Resources Control Board to cancel an application if an applicant does not demonstrate an interest in obtaining within a reasonable time the requested water right permit. That's in Water Code sections 1255, 1276, 1334, 1335, and the Code of Regulations Title 23, Section 840. Many of the policy rationales identified above exist here. The AHO is certainly within its authority to cancel the city's application, and good public policy supports that it do so. We understand that the purpose of this hearing is to receive evidence to consider whether the AHO should cancel or deny the application under Water Code sections 1276 and 1335, and thus limit this statement to that issue. Should the AHO determine not to cancel the application, at the appropriate time, we may submit comment as to the substance of the application and reserve the right to participate in any continued review of the application. Specific to this hearing, we also reserve the right to file a closing brief should we believe further comment is necessary and would be helpful. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Let me shift over to the Westlands Water District.
Yes.
Mr. Rubin.
Yes, good morning. Thank you. I join in the comments that Ms. Beecham made on behalf of the San Luis Delta Mendota Water Authority. Incorporate those as Westland's comments rather than repeat them, leave it at that.
Okay, thank you very much. And then the Department of Water Resources, Mr. Soderlund, do you have an either opening statement, policy statement you'd like to present this morning?
I do not. Thank you.
Okay. So let's move on to other entities presenting policy statements only. Contra Costa Water District, you've already indicated you will not be presenting oral comments, so that means restore the Delta. You have a comment, a policy statement you'd like to offer, this is the time.
Thank you very much. Good morning to all attending. I am Tim Stroshane, Policy Analyst with Restore the Delta. We understand that the question before the Administrative Hearings Office of the State Water Board in this matter is whether the application should be canceled for lack of due diligence on the city's part, or whether the Water Board should instead establish a time schedule by which the City of Stockton submits information the Water Board needs to process application 30531B so that the city may obtain a permit to divert additional water. It would be premature, unwise, and unjust of this proceeding to cancel the City of Stockton's water right application. We find the Water Board's notice of public hearing and pre-hearing conference in this matter skews its chronology to appear that the city has been less than diligent in proceeding with application 30531B to increase diversions, showing only large gaps between periods of correspondence with the city. It fails to note that the Water Board's own numerous delays in processing this application while dealing with first the drought of 2012 to 2016, then the 4-year evidentiary proceeding and the change petition for California Water Fix, followed by completing phase 1 of a long delayed Bay Delta plan in late 2018. In the meantime, the City of Stockton began and completed construction of its Delta Water Supply Project, DWSP, for its first water rights permit to divert 30 million gallons per day, equivalent to 33,600 acre feet per year. It sized the intake of its diversion facility and raw water pipeline to accommodate not just the first permit, but a second as well. That is the permit based on, that is the subject of this hearing. This represents a substantial investment of capital, engineering, and expertise in facilities that position the city to diligently divert additional supplies from the San Joaquin River for treatment and distribution once the Water Board processes the subject application. Moreover, let those without the sin of delay and lack of due diligence cast the first stone. Both the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation and the California Department of Water Resources were granted time extension requests for their respective Central Valley Project and State Water Project permits, both of which expired and, to our knowledge, have not been extended. Certain underground tunnel facilities remain mired in planning stages 6 years later, and the State Water Board still has yet to issue licenses to both projects, let alone modify existing permits. We agree with the City of Stockton that their construction of the city's DWSP and associated treatment plant represent a diligent prosecution of their earlier permit and their subject application. Cancellation of the application for the additional 33,600 acre feet per year risks stranding the city's water diversion and treatment assets, which diligently and efficiently divert the city's own treated wastewater from the river and treats it for reuse by Stockton residents. While the city maintains it has financial capacity to put water to beneficial use under a new permit that could be issued, the city's fiscal condition remains precarious from the ravages of the coronavirus pandemic recession and a prolonged history of economic disinvestment. Cancellation of this water right application would worsen this picture for the city. The hydrological and ecological footprint of the city's water system is tiny relative to that of key parts to this proceeding that would cancel the city's application. The face value of the city's existing permit plus its subject application would be about 67,000 acre feet per year, just over half its original application of 122,000 acre feet. This reduced amount is just over 1% of total Delta exports by CBP and SWP combined in 2011, a very wet water year. Finally, forcing the city of Stockton to accept its water diversion and treatment system as a partially stranded asset would be discriminatory. Stockton is home to a large environmental justice or disadvantaged community and can ill afford to have its municipal water system be the object of harassment by the water board and protestants to this proceeding. We urge the Administrative Hearings Office of the State Water Board to reject calls to cancel this application and instead engage with the city of Stockton to plan a schedule for the city to provide information necessary to process application 30531B. Thank you for considering Restore the Delta's policy statement in this matter. And I have a written version of it. Shall I email it to the AHO email address?
Yes, please.
Very good, I will. Thank you for the time.
Okay, thank you very much. So we finished our policy statements and we'll now move on to the presentation of the case in chief, and the city of Stockton is the only party that has indicated it will present witnesses today. So Mr. Ferguson, if you have an opening statement that you'd like to provide, this would be the time to do it.
Good, I do. The city of Stockton appreciates the opportunity to present evidence supporting its position that the State Water Board should not cancel application 30531B and should instead maintain the application and limit its maximum annual diversion quantity to an amount that would preserve the city's forward-thinking investments in the Delta Water Supply Project. First, you'll hear from Dr. Mel Lytle, the city's Director of Municipal Utilities. Dr. Lytle will explain how since 2007, the city has complied with the State Water Board's request for information related to application 30531B by providing estimates of the date the city would prepare a project level CEQA analysis and put water to beneficial use. Dr. Lytle will describe how these estimates have evolved over time in response to changed circumstances since the State Water Board bifurcated application 30531 in 2005. Key circumstances include diversion limitations placed on permit 21176, resulting from a biological opinion and incidental take permit issued in 2008, and a reduction in demand associated with the recession. Dr. Lytle will further describe how the city has initiated construction of facilities necessary to put water that would be made available pursuant to any permit issued on application 30531B to beneficial use by sizing portions of the Delta Water Supply Project to ultimately divert and convey more than the 30 million gallons per day authorized by permit 21176. This expanded capacity came at an estimated cost of $25 million. These efforts demonstrate the city's capacity to diligently prosecute construction once the necessary permitting and environmental compliance is complete and demand for application 30531B water is imminent. Finally, Dr. Lytle will outline the city's efforts to date to plan for use of application 30531B and demonstrate the city's financial capacity to ultimately put this water to beneficial use. You will then hear from Mr. Granberg. Mr. Granberg was the former Assistant Director of Municipal Utilities for the city of Stockton and now serves as an engineering and project management consultant for the city of Stockton and other public agencies. Mr. Granberg will explain why, based on new information and a potential interest in improving Eastern San Joaquin subbasin conditions, application 30531B water supplies may be necessary sooner than the city had projected in its 2020 Urban Water Management Plan. Mr. Granberg will review updated water supply and demand projections that reflect assumptions associated with this new information. Finally, Mr. Granberg will present the city's rationale for its request that the State Water Board maintain application 30531B and limit the annual diversion quantity. This proposal is intended to ensure that the city is not left with stranded assets in the portions of the Delta Water Supply Project facilities exceeding 30 million gallons per day. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So Mr. Ferguson, I'd like to swear in both of your witnesses since we'll be working with them today as a panel, and then you may proceed. So Mr. Lytle, Could you please raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you will give in this hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, great. Mr. Granberg, we'll go ahead and swear you in if you raise your right hand, please. Do you swear or affirm under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you will give in this hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, fantastic. Mr. Ferguson, ball is in your court. You may proceed with your first witness.
Dr. Lytle, is Stockton 1 a true and correct copy of your testimony in this proceeding?
It is.
And do you have any corrections or revisions you would like to make to that testimony at this time?
No, not at this time.
All right, Dr. Lytle, can you please summarize your testimony?
Sure, thank you, and good morning. It's always a fun experience to jump in front of the State Water Board and try to describe some of the things that you've been working on that you've taken to heart for many, many years. And I'll move ahead and just try to summarize some of the high points of my testimony. I'm sure that's all included as evidence, and those that want to look at it in more detail can. But I want to sort of jump into a couple of the details that I think are most pertinent in this situation. Moving forward, I think that the communications that we've received over the years, the city has complied with the requirements of the State Water Board as far as the communications were concerned. I think that we've submitted the plans as we knew them at that time, as well as anticipated schedules, and all that information I think was provided to the State Water Board with sincere intent as far as what we knew at the time and moving ahead, not knowing the conditions that would occur. And I'll try to describe that a little bit. And then two, I want to jump into the actual construction of the Delta Water Supply Project. A friend from the Restore the Delta has brought forward some very good information regarding the development of that project, its construction, and moving forward. And then three, I want to talk a little bit about the financial plan, our capability as far as resources go to move ahead when Part B is actually permitted to divert, treat, and deliver that water to the city of Stockton into the future. So with that, as far as communications go, after we filed our water right application back in 1996, the State Water Board communicated with us in 2005, asking for information and regarding the application, the history of the bifurcation of the application into Part A and Part B. That's all included as evidence, but I really wanted to mention that within it, there's two parts that I see as critical. One being Water Code Section 1485 and our ability to be able to divert water from essentially a like amount from our wastewater treatment plant, and also Section 11460. And that's looking specifically at Part B as something that may be important into the future. We all know regarding the split of the application, Part A, that's been an active component of our workings in our department and our treatment and delivery to the citizens of the city of Stockton, with a total amount of 33,600 acre feet. Part B, that being 92,300 acre feet, a total of 125,900 acre feet. As far as communications, since all that happened, the State Water Board essentially communicated with us 3 different times regarding application or Part B of the application, that being in 2007, again in 2013, and again in 2020. And in each case, the city of Stockton responded in a timely manner and provided the information that was asked for. I won't go into all the details about each one of those communications, though they're listed as evidence, as well as some of the summary details within my testimony. But I think one of the important parts has to deal also with, as time progressed, particularly in 2013, in our response there, we were looking at overall reductions in demand due to the economic slowdown in the city of Stockton, and that we tried to portray in that communication. We also looked at some other things that we listed in that regarding decreased demand overall. The most recent communication that included a lot of information was in August of 2020. We looked at multiple supply planning issues as we moved forward. One of them was the actual extension of our Part A of the permit, permit 21176, and that information we worked on for some time, updating some of our demand projections, and I think Bob Granberg may go into that in a little bit more detail a little later on. But also, all that work was actually submitted, and I believe it's still standing as active before the State Water Board. So we haven't heard about that yet. Some of the things that we brought forward was, as part of that extension, we were looking at the issue of restrictions against our permit regarding delta smelt spawning periods in the spring and early summer. Those were put on us by U.S. Fish and Wildlife in their biological opinions in the California State Department of Fish and Wildlife, that essentially kind of hamstringed our ability to divert water in the spring because of the delta smelt closure period. And that limited our overall diversion amount under Part A. And so that was one of the main things in that extension that we're most interested in. And with that, part of that, I won't get into a lot of detail, but with if we were able to go back and do some of the analysis and look at whether or not those fish impacts are truly valid, it may give us more of an opportunity to be able to divert more water during that period under 21176. And that was one of the things we were looking at. In addition to that, we were also looking at an active conjunctive use program that would allow us to divert water and put it into a recharge basin there at the water treatment plant. Why is that important? It allows us to be able to take water under that permit during the winter months when our essentially demand in the city is much lower than it is in the summertime. And so we would be able to capture more of that water under that permit. And the same is true as if, as we're able to move ahead with Part B, as we continue to increase demand in the city, the ability for us to use that proposed recharge facility under Part B would be something that we're very interested in. Because if you see in my testimony, part of this is very important for the overall restoration of the groundwater basin. The city is an active member in the Groundwater Authority. That's a 16-member agency that developed a groundwater sustainability plan in 2020 and looked at many of the reasons or essentially ways to help recover the basin from its critical overdraft condition. And so we look at Part B, the continued use of Part A, and as we develop Part B as a very important source for our community and our portion of the groundwater basin for its recovery and our continued use of conjunctive activities that we rely on. Go on a little bit. So that's essentially the communications that have been gone back and forth between the city and the State Water Board. And there's a lot of information there that I refer to the evidence as well as, the other communications that went back and forth. The next part I'd like to talk about is actually the development of the Delta Water Supply Project. Bob Granberg is on our team today. He was active in the development of that project from the permitting to its actual construction. And I was fortunate enough to step in 2012 when it was dedicated. And we brought that project forward and moved it into operations and actual delivery of water to the city of Stockton. It was the largest public works project the city has ever accomplished at $223 million. And it provided a new supply of water to the city that allows for diversion from the Delta, as well as the conveyance and diversion and treatment of water under contract from Woodbridge Irrigation District on the McCollum River. That increased the city's capability as far as its redundancy and resiliency of water supplies, where once it was 100% dependent on groundwater back in the 1970s and 80s. The city and the urban contractors includes Cal Water and portions of San Joaquin County worked very closely with Stockton East Water District to develop a surface water source. And so this was the newest development overall from the city of Stockton's point of view. From one source, groundwater pumping that could help create overdraft, to now we have 5 active sources of water that we can rely upon currently and into the future. The project itself, like I said, it was dedicated in 2012. Is there any way that I could see figure 1 in my testimony that includes a figure map?
Yes, absolutely. Ms. Mullen, would you pull up Stockton Exhibit 1, please? And then Dr. Leto, are you referring to the table in?
No, I'm referring to figure number 1, Delta Water Supply Project Area Map. It is on page 6 of my testimony.
Yes. We'll pull that up for a second. Oh yeah, there we have it.
Thank you. I'll try to describe, if those that are not familiar with the project itself. On the lower left side, you see intake location. That's number 1. That's the location of our intake pump station on the southwestern tip of Empire Tract. It's a facility that has pumping house, state-of-the-art fish screens, the pumps located. There's 4 of them. Each of them are 250 horsepower, capable of diverting up to 80 MGD. As you travel northbound, you see the white line extends all the way up to what's called 8 Mile Road. That's our raw water intake pipeline. It's a 54-inch line. It travels from west to east along 8 Mile Road, down across King Island, across Bishop Track, and under I-5, all the way over to where you see WTP site. That's about 12 miles, 54-inch raw water line. Located just off Lower Sacramento Road on a 68-acre parcel is the Delta Water Supply Project treatment plant. It's capable of 30 million gallons per day. It has ozone pre-treatment, settling basins, ultrafiltration, as well as chloramine disinfection. Following that, it distributes water through a couple of different 48-inch pipelines into the northern part of Stockton. Like I said earlier, the project itself was $223 million in a cost to the city. What I also wanted to highlight, it's been highlighted a little bit already, is as this project was developed, there was purposeful intention to oversize the facility to allow for additional water under Part B. That includes oversizing the raw water line, as well as the intake pump station that will allow up to about 60 MGD and to be conveyed to the treatment plant. The treatment plant itself is designed to increase its treatment works as well. There can be the addition of additional settling basins, the addition of membrane filtration buildings to the point that we can accommodate up to that amount. That's the way the project was designed and planned for. As in my testimony, it says the city spent an extra $25 million on that portion alone to help prepare the city as Part B was granted going forward. So we didn't have to go back and expand the pumping station or put in an extra raw water line or something like that. But we can do that on the fly. And that gives us a huge amount of facility as far as developing as demand increases. And so you can take down that figure now. Thank you very much. So under both Part A and Part B, the project itself is ready to go as demand increases. Ultimately, at full build out, it would require new tooling at the actual intake pump station. It would require an additional raw water line and expansion of the treatment works. But that would be done over progressive numbers of years. That allows us to maximize the full usage of Part A and Part B. Now, as evidence of the city's financial resources, many people I'm sure are familiar that the city of Stockton declared bankruptcy several years ago and has since recovered from that. The utility itself was never subject to the bank's bankruptcy. It's the water utility itself is supported under ratepayer funding, and we've been under the common practice to move ahead with water rate studies and projected increases over every 5 years. We just completed a water rate study and rate increase this last year. So additional evidence of our financial capabilities and our determination would be any additional improvements that we've made to the Delta Water Supply Project, as well as another critical component of our overall program, and that is our regional wastewater control facility. It's under a new permit conditions will require additional treatment for nitrite plus nitrate. And that has required us to do a very large treatment train improvement project that would allow us to comply with the new permit conditions. On top of that, it's also a change in the way the city treats water. And not only will it improve the quality of water, but it will greatly lessen the amount of evaporation that we currently experience we have over 700 acres of evaporation ponds. And because of that, we can, the new treatment processes that will be going forward will eliminate that, which will allow us to discharge water at a higher rate into the San Joaquin River. We look at these as essentially the same program. Our ability to discharge water into the San Joaquin River and our ability to divert that water under Section 1485. The investment of what we call the modifications project is about $220 million. It's active as we speak. That's about 60% complete, with the goal to achieve the complete operational capability of the project by the deadline in June of 2024. That shows additional capability of the city to expend large amounts of money on our utilities and our ability to not only divert, treat, and deliver, but also collect, treat, and discharge as part of an overall program for the city going forward. And Part B is an essential component of that. On top of that, we've maintained our application. In Part B, we've spent over $82,000 in application fees to the State Water Board. So with that, I think that all the other amounts of my testimony are in my testimony. The evidence is in my testimony, and I would be happy to answer any questions or anything from there going forward. So thank you for your time.
Mr. Ferguson, go ahead.
So can we move on to Mr. Granberg now?
Yes.
Great, thank you. Mr. Granberg, is Stockton 2 a true and correct copy of your testimony?
Yes, it is.
Are there any revisions or corrections you would like to make to your testimony at this time?
No, not at this time.
Okay. And is Stockton 3 a true and correct copy of your resume?
Yes, it is.
Okay, great. So Mr. Granberg, can you please proceed to summarize your testimony?
I'd be happy to. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to be here, and I'll briefly summarize my testimony, which you have before you and is in the record. As stated, Robert Granberg, I am a consultant and have worked in water and wastewater planning and program and project management for many years. And as it relates to the city of Stockton, most importantly, from 2004 to 2013, I was responsible for the long-term water supply planning for the city, and also project manager for the Delta Water Supply Project. And as part of that, the city, under my leadership at that time, was undergoing the implementation of the Delta Water Supply Project, feasibility study, the EIR, getting that project ready to enter into design and construction. And then also, during that time, the city was undergoing significant growth, and city had a 2008 general plan that required water supply plans to be able to show that the water would be available for the city to be able to grow. So from an urban water municipal supplier, you really start with what the city's plans are for growth through the general plan process. And then more specifically, the state requires under the urban water management plan for water utilities to develop these urban water management plans and to revisit those every 5 years. So I was involved in the 2005, 2010, and 2015 urban water management plan update. And then in my testimony, it reflects revisions and updates that were completed in 2020 that demonstrate the city's need for water to meet demand going forward into the future. In addition to the Urban Water Management Plan Act in compliance, the Groundwater Sustainability Plan for the City of Stockton, which is a member of the Regional Groundwater Sustainability Agency, has stated goals for achieving groundwater sustainability into the future. And that all fits into the water supply plan that the city has laid out before us and into the future. So in looking at and updating for this testimony, the Part B money, water under 30531, and the need for that was updated through the 2020 Urban Water Management Plan, and took a look at current demand over the last 5 years, projected demand into the future, and any supply changes that were contemplated in the prior Urban Water Management Plan, and whether or not that picture would change into the future. And through that effort, some things came to light. I want to focus on the supply uncertainty. The City of Stockton is part of what's called the Urban Water Contractors. They're retail water suppliers to the Stockton metropolitan area. So it's the City of Stockton, the California Water Service Company, and San Joaquin County. And the surface water supplies currently to the Stockton metropolitan area come from the Stockton East Water District, in addition to the water that comes to the City of Stockton through the Woodbridge Irrigation District. And part of the Urban Water Management Plan, there's coordination that has to take place between the entities that are supplying water to the metropolitan area or the urban water contractors. And it was apparent in the Stockton East Urban Water Management Plan that they assumed that in 2035, at the termination of the second amended contract, which is the wholesale water contract to the urban water contractors, that water would not be available to the urban contractors. And that was new information, even though the city had presumed that there would be an extension of that contract beyond 2035. So that changed things significantly. Also, with the Groundwater Sustainability Plan, we took a look at whether or not there would be the need for additional surface water supplies to provide additional protection to the groundwater basin to show its sustainability well out into the future, up to 2070. So we talk about in detail about the Stockton East Water District wholesale water contract in my testimony, but it's the sources of water for that are the Stanislaus River, the New Melones Reservoir under a CDP contract that Stockton East has with the Bureau of Reclamation, and then the Calaveras water system and the New Hogan Reservoir is also water supply to the Stockton East Water District. One of the other supply uncertainties is the recently adopted water quality control plan for the San Francisco Bay, Sacramento, San Joaquin Delta estuary that was not mentioned in the Stockton East 2020 Urban Water Management Plan. So that's an additional uncertainty to the supplies that would come from the Stockton East Water District. through the wholesale water contract. The Woodbridge Irrigation District is a supplemental source of surface water supply to the Delta Water Supply Project to fill the gap of the water lost through the 1485 right under permit 21176 for ESA protection that, as was mentioned previously, that occur in the late winter through the spring and early summer. And that is a wholesale water contract that has a termination date of 2048 and has some supply reliability issues as well. Groundwater is the other source of water to the urban water contractors. The city of Stockton has groundwater wells. Cal Water, similarly, San Joaquin County does not. The groundwater sustainability plan, as I mentioned, requires that there be a plan followed that will ensure groundwater sustainability to the M&I users within the city of Stockton. And there were presumptions of that sustainable yield from the groundwater basin that has been carried throughout the urban water management plans for quite some time. And if additional protections are required through the GSP, then there would be a need for additional surface water supplies for urban use within the city of Stockton. So I want to focus attention on table 1, which is on page 6 of my testimony.
Okay, Mr. Granberg, oh, may I interrupt you for a second? Let's pull that up so we can put it on the screen. So Ms. Mullen, could you pull up Stockton Exhibit 2, please?
Thank you. So what this table shows is from 2025 out to 2070, we identify the supply source on the left column, the first column, and where that water is coming from and where the data was derived for this table. So the first supply source is under Delta Water Supply 1485 right that is currently in use, and that was projected as currently and into 2025 at 23,400 acre feet, increasing slightly up to 2035 and 2040, which is the limit of the 2020 Urban Water Management Plan. And that reflects the curtailment of the 33,600 acre foot quantity under 1485. So that's the maximum amount that the city would be able to divert from the Delta due to that those ESA restrictions. So they, as I mentioned, they make up the balance of the demand or capacity of the Delta Water Supply Project through purchasing water from the Woodbridge Irrigation District. And that is, as well, is projected out in 2025. That is a current limit of 6,500 acre feet per year. The contract with Woodbridge has an option for an additional 6,500 acre feet under certain conditions. It was projected that in 2030, that additional water would be available through that contract out to 2045 on a 5-year increment. As I mentioned earlier, in 2048, that contract does cease to exist at that point. Going down to the next line, the purchased water from Stockton East Water District currently in 2025 or projected in 2025 at 24,300 acre feet, and again in 2030, and then at the termination of that contract in 2035, there would be no water available moving forward. Groundwater availability is 23,100 acre feet. That's the sustainable yield of the groundwater basin and Stockton's ability to draw that amount out without further harming the groundwater basin. And that's projected out to be consistent at 23,100 acre feet. So moving to the Part B water, the subject of the matter before us, if all groundwater is available under that presumption of 23,100 acre feet, and then trying to meet demand, projected demand on the bottom row there, An additional 2,240 acre feet of water would be needed in 2050 under Part B. And if additional groundwater protection is needed through the GSP, I took a look at limiting groundwater to 10% of demand on line 23 there, projected out into the future. And with that limitation on groundwater demand, additional surface water under Part B would be needed as early as 2035 at 845 acre feet, and projected out to in 2070 with the addition of the 1485 right and groundwater would require an additional 27,832 acre feet under Part B. And so that number, is getting very close to what we're asking for under this effort, that we limit Part B water to 33,600 acre feet, which is the as-built capacity of the raw water pipeline from the intake pump station to the water treatment plant. And that's the assets that have been constructed and are ready to be used and were contemplated to be used when the Delta Water Supply Project was built in 2009 to 2012. And so what would be needed at that time would be additional pumping capacity and additional treatment units at the water treatment plant. And the water treatment plant has been designed for that next increment of expansion very cost effectively. So it wouldn't require a new pipeline from the Delta, which is a major cost to the city of Stockton, and being able to maximize the use of the assets that are there today is very important to the city of Stockton, as was in the testimony. Approximately $25 million of that prior investment is there today and waiting to be used through a Part B water right application and use. So I think that's I've summarized table 1. Some of the other supply uncertainties that that come to light over time through this urban water management plan effort is climate change. We don't know what the future will hold as far as the climate and its ability to deposit snowpack, or whether it's going to be rainwater, the ability to capture that rainwater in reservoirs and be available for use in the subsequent years. There's also demand uncertainty. One of the other important and enlightening aspects of the urban water management plan effort is seeing how your customers are using water. And as we've seen, as the city has seen through this COVID, a lot more people were staying home, using water in their home, not driving away and going to work in the Bay Area. They were staying home. So there was an uptick in water use over the water utility, and that's an uncertainty. So will that continue? We don't know. Back to the general plan, how is the city going to grow? There is a plan for that future growth. Whether or not, how that happens will be seen. And I think that's why it's important with these urban water management plans to relook at demand over that 5-year period and update those projections on that timeline. And also, how are people using water? Are they being more conservative in their water use? There was a significant reduction in water use during the drought of 2014 to 2017, and that impacts how you look at water supply needs into the future. So in summary, just again, the proposed limitation on Part B is to consider revising the application amount to the limit of the raw water pipeline. It seems to make sense from a planning perspective that the city has invested in that asset and had always contemplated maximizing the use of that asset, and aligning the revised application Part B to that amount just makes good planning sense for the city and for the state board to consider through this application and process. So with that, I would entertain any questions that you might have.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, great. So we're going to move on to cross-examination, which will be done as a panel. I know some of the parties have indicated they may or may not have cross-examination questions, but I'm going to ask anyway. Each witness I think the total time for the testimony was about 35 minutes. So to the extent you have many cross-examination questions, try to keep them within about 35 minutes. But I don't know if that'll be the case. So Ms. Beecham, I'll go ahead and start with you. Did you have any cross-examination questions for either of the City of Stockton's witnesses?
No, we do not. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Soderlund, did you have any cross-examination questions?
No questions, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Rubin, did you have any cross-examination questions today?
Mr. Rubin had to drop off the line for a conflict, but he did not have any questions.
Okay, fair enough.
Thank you.
Okay, so I have some questions. I'd like to take a quick 5-minute break just to stretch my legs a little bit. So you can go on mute and just take 5 minutes. We'll come back at 10:07. All right, we are back after a very short break. Thanks, everyone. Okay, so I'm going to start with some questions for both of the witnesses for the city of Stockton. We will be looking at specific aspects of your written testimony, but I wanted to start, Dr. Lytle, with you and with some big picture questions that'll just kind of, I think something I was wondering about. So the application at issue here would seek to use wastewater that the city of Stockton would discharge into the San Joaquin River. So I'm wondering, has the city ever considered a closed system where you wouldn't discharge into the San Joaquin River and then pick up this river, this water, you know, farther downstream? Have you ever considered a closed system instead of discharging?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay, okay.
Potentially, or Mr. Granberg might have some information on that, but not to my knowledge.
I think the city did look at a couple things back in the early planning days. One was a marketability analysis for taking treated wastewater and increasing the level of treatment and then marketing it to industry or agriculture. And it was deemed to be economically not feasible, and to continue to discharge to the San Joaquin River. And because of that, the ability under Water Code Section 1485 made it pretty clear that would be the way to go for developing future water supply, and just having to be able to build an intake pipeline and a water treatment plant. A direct point-to-point connection would require a large pipeline from the southwest portion of the city all the way up to the north end of the city. And that would be a significant investment in infrastructure. And the city has, built the assets that it has today. So it just makes sense economically to continue in that mode of operation.
Okay, thank you. And then my other question for Dr. Lytle or both of you is, do you know if the city is currently using all of its water under its other water rights?
All of its water, meaning?
Well, is it using the maximum amount that it could be using under its, I know it has other water rights, so is there additional, I guess, volume that it could be using from under those other water rights?
Well, we have contract rights with Stockton East and Woodbridge Irrigation District. And then the only water right permit, as you know, we have is 21176.
Okay.
And so are we using all of it? No. But in certain times of the year, particularly during the summer months, we're maximizing our diversion of water from the Delta. And our treatment plant maxes at just under 30 MGD. It's like 27 to 28 because of just facility restrictions. But so we rely either on additional diversion from Stockton East Water District or additional groundwater pumping. One added issue with that, when we developed the Delta Water Supply Project, we also moved to convert to chloramine disinfection from free chlorine. And we do have a 48-inch connection between Stockton East Treatment Plant and North Stockton. When we began operating and converting to chloramine, we found that the design of the facilities to allow for us to inject that disinfection into the Stockton East treatment from the Stockton East supply was insufficient. And we've recently completed a project that will allow us to take additional Stockton East water into North Stockton and sufficiently treat it with chloramine disinfection. And so that gives us a little added bonus into this north part of Stockton ultimately, it will allow us to decrease our groundwater pumping in North Stockton in a similar fashion. The amount we can take from Stockton East, we can decrease the amount of pumping in North Stockton. So, but to answer your question, no, we're not maximizing everything yet.
Okay. Ms. Mullen, can we put up Ms. Dr. Lytle's testimony, please, Stockton Exhibit 1? And then can we scroll to paragraph 15, which is on page 5, please? Okay, so Dr. Lytle, I wanted to now kind of focus on you and ask you some specific questions about your testimony. So you're summarizing some letters that the city sent to the water board, but I wanted to ask about the biological opinion and the incidental take permit, because those appear to provide some limits as to what the city, the amount of water that the city is going to be able to use. So Ms. Mullen, can you scroll to the top of page 5, please? So it looks like I'm looking at the last sentence here on page 5, paragraph 15. It says, if the city were to obtain amendments to the biological opinion and the incidental take permit that would allow it to pump at a greater rate in the non-restricted months, the city estimated that it would need application 30531B water sometime between 2050 and 2055. So Dr. Lytle, can you talk a little bit about the process of obtaining amendments to conditions like this? I think you mentioned in your testimony that you'd be looking at whether these are valid. So can you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, I think that just from what I understand, I think Mr. Granberg also knows a little bit more about this too, that because of the restrictions placed on us, because of those actions from the state and federal government, we're unable or restricted in our pumping in the spring and early summer. And earlier, I know last year we looked at this in a little bit more detail, that we could potentially go back and redo some of this work to look to see whether or not those impacts out in front of our intake pump station are truly evident. And it would require us to go back in and do some additional fish population analyses and things of that nature that would allow us to potentially go back through that process to reanalyze whether or not the conditions put upon our permit, over 10 years ago are still valid because of the tendencies and conditions that occur in the Delta, as well as the continued population trends that the Delta smelt are experiencing.
Is this an analysis that you're planning to undertake, or you mentioned you're considering it last summer? So is this, where are you on the timeline of whether you're going to look back at some of this fish analysis?
We put it in as sort of a factor that we were going to want to go back and look at this as part of our extension request on Part A of the application. We haven't taken a step to do that yet, but I think primarily because we're waiting for sort of discussion back from the State Water Board regarding our extension. And so, but that is definitely something that we could potentially look at, because whether or not it would allow us to divert at a higher rate, have no clue, but there is financial capability of the city that would allow us to do that type of analysis.
Okay. And then I wanted to move on to the next paragraph here. Let me look at my notes. Ms. Mullen, could you scroll down a little bit, please? I've written that it was in. Okay, well, I think it's not necessarily in this paragraph, but I'm just going to ask the question anyway, because Dr. Lido, you spoke about groundwater recharge and conjunctive use. So is it your view that the groundwater recharge would be pursuant to the permit that you already have, 21176, or what would be the mechanism for the groundwater recharge?
Actually, both.
Okay.
Under the actual, our extension request that was submitted to the State Water Board, that effort to develop the groundwater recharge basins at the Delta Water Supply Project was actually discussed. It's essentially what we call Delta Water Supply Phase 2, and it was actually referred to in the original environmental document for the Delta Water Supply Project development. And with that, it was also included in the integrated regional water management plans for the area. The city of Stockton would at some time execute Phase 2. In the environmental document, it was looked at as potentially the development of an aquifer, storage and recovery type project. But most lately, there's been proposal to move ahead with an actual active recharge basin project at the treatment plant site. We have about 40 acres or more available. That's currently pasture land that is included in our overall campus. And we're interested in looking at that as a probable site for active recharge. We would look at using the water under 21176 when demand is low during the winter time, because we have a lot of our maximum diversion or maximum discharge out of our wastewater treatment plant during the winter months. And so it gives us an opportunity to capture some of that flow as it passes down the San Joaquin River. If Part B is allowed to move forward, we would also be able to do the same thing. Take the water when demand is low and divert it to the recharge basins for recharge and active conjunctive use through our wells facilities in North Stockton. And so that's the concept.
Okay.
We have an active, we're just getting ready to release an RFP to complete the geohydrology of the site so that we can investigate the capability of the site as far as a recharge basin into the future. But that's current status of what's going on.
Okay.
We did get indication that the city will receive a $2 million grant through the IRWM process for that project. And so we're actively moving on that. We hope to complete the hydrologic study over this in 2022, followed by design, permitting, and construction.
Sorry, what is IRWM?
Integrated Regional Water Management Planning Process. It's a state program that's been active for many years. We're part of that process through was the Groundwater Basin Authority. Now it's the Regional Water Coordinating Committee in San Joaquin County. And so that's what IRWM is.
Thank you. You've also mentioned it within your testimony and then also today, you've used conjunctive use, this phrase, which I know can have different definitions. So can you provide a definition of how you understand that term to be used here in your testimony?
I'm looking at we look at surface water diversion from the Delta as conjunctive use because it's an in lieu supply of water for our groundwater base. We use surface water in lieu of groundwater pumping. Then there's also active groundwater conjunctive use, which is the actual active recharge of water into the basin for storage and use.
And you're using that term to kind of cover both. I guess it's sort of context specific, but I just wanted to make sure I understand because it does have those two definitions that you've described.
Correct. Yeah,
Okay.
we use conjunctive use interchangeably. We look at it that way.
Yes. Okay, let's see. I'm looking at, okay, so we've got this up on the screen. That's perfect. So paragraph 16, line 13, Dr. Lytle, you state in your testimony, the city sized the DWSP intake structure and raw water pipeline to accommodate water use greater than that authorized in permit 21176. So I wanted to ask about the sizing of those pipes. Were they sized only in anticipation of water that might become available under application 30531B?
You may want to ask Mr. Granberg that question. He's more familiar with the actual design parameters of why it was built the way it was built.
Okay, I'll move that to my questions for him. Thank you. Let's see.
You bet.
Okay, Ms. Mullen, could we scroll down to paragraph 18, please? And so the first sentence, the city has developed a phased plan for the use of water under application 30531. And in this paragraph, you describe some of those efforts. As far as CEQA documentation and planning to comply with CEQA requirements, has anything been done since 2005? I'm looking at this paragraph and there are a lot of references to the 2005 draft DWSP EIR, but is there anything else as far as using this water that's been done since 2005?
Not specifically by the city that I'm aware of, but we did, not included in my testimony, we did participate in a more regional programmatic effort that looked at overall integrated conjunctive use program. Here we are with that word again for the county. And that was done after 2005.
Do you know when you participated in that program? What year that was?
I think it was 2009, 10.
Okay.
But we can, I can get the actual date when that document was published.
Okay. And then since 2009, there have not been other efforts that you're aware of that the city's been participating in with respect to CEQA planning and documentation for use of this water?
No, not specifically.
Okay. Let's see. I wanted to ask about something in paragraph 19. So Ms. Mullen, could we scroll to page 7, please? And at the end of this paragraph, lines 14 and 15, let's see, you describe Project 20 in the Groundwater Sustainability Plan, mobilizing recharge opportunities, which could help address this overdraft. Can you, I know this is kind of a minor point, but I was just sort of curious about this. Do you have any more information about this? Oh, have we lost? Let's see. We lost Dr. Lytle. I'm not seeing him on my screen anymore.
Am I gone?
No, there you are. Okay,
Okay.
we're all good. So Dr. Lytle, do you, again, I know this is kind of potentially obscure, but do you happen to know about this project? It's just a bit vague in this at the end of this paragraph here, and I was just wondering if you're able to provide any more details about this project 20.
You can hear me okay and everything?
Yes, yes.
Okay. I would have to pull out the groundwater sustainability plan to give you actual, text on project 20. I think those were more generalized efforts to move ahead with recharge opportunities throughout the basin.
Yes.
I know that our project is one that has moved forward since that time. It was in the original documents, planning documents for the basin, but now it's becoming much, much more specified as we move forward. I know Stockton East Water District is actively moving ahead with mobilizing different recharge opportunities in the basin. I know North San Joaquin Water Conservation is doing the same. And so at the time of the groundwater sustainability plan development, there were some historic projects, but then there was also sort of what are we developing now? How are things moving forward? And some of them were specific, but then some of them were captured under project 20.
Okay. Yeah, I was able to look at Stockton 17 and the exhibit that you cited there, and that does have more details. So it sounds like that should be the place that I can look for more information there.
Yeah, the ultimate goal is to encourage agencies in the basin to help recover the basin to the extent it says here, overdraft of approximately 78,000 acre feet. And so, the city of Stockton, we're looking at it from we're a little selfish in the sense that we're looking to maximize our permit and being able to take as much water as possible, but also do what we can to help contribute to that overall overdraft of the basin and continue to maintain our ability to pump in a safe manner. And so that's essentially what we're trying to do.
Okay. I wanted to move on to paragraph 20. So in the following paragraph, Ms. Muller, yes, perfect. Thank you so much. So you've stated that the Eastern San Joaquin Subbasin Groundwater Sustainability Plan emphasizes the importance of augmented surface water supplies to remedy undesirable results related to the chronic lowering of groundwater levels. And then I'm looking at line 19, where you say future undesirable results related to chronic lowering of groundwater levels could arise from increased groundwater pumping demands, and that this is most likely to occur if there's inadequate surface supply development, including permitting of application 30531B. I think you've touched on this a little bit, but is there anything else just in this paragraph that you wanted to expand on here that would be helpful for us?
No, I think that in some ways it describes what's going on, but that has been the overall focus of the recovery of our groundwater basin. And it's been many years that various agencies have been looking to use additional surface water supply to decrease overall groundwater pumping. The city of Stockton has moved ahead with their Delta Water Supply Project. The city of Lodi moved ahead with surface water diversions and a new treatment plant. City of Manteca, Lathrop, and the city of Tracy are part of the South County Water Supply Project that's sponsored from San Joaquin South San Joaquin Irrigation District. Overall, that's increased surface water deliveries to the urban areas in a hugely significant manner, and an investment overall of probably close to $800 million to develop these surface water treatment plants. So we're serving a lot more surface water to help minimize the overall groundwater impact. Now there's a lot of active effort amongst the agricultural diverters and users of groundwater to use the additional surface water supply that's available from the New Maloney's Calaveras system, the McCollum as well. And I know the county is active in trying to defend their American River application because they're looking at that as a potential source of water into the future, as well as additional application on the McCollum. So all those are being used to hopefully secure the issues of our groundwater basin so that we don't have, chronic chlorine of groundwater and undesirable results, because we know what the impact, what that will do, as well as the state is promising to come in and start managing our basin for us. And we're not interested in that.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Lytle. Those were all the questions that I had for you. So Mr. Granberg, may I turn to you and ask you a couple of questions?
Certainly.
So the first one I wanted to ask, kind of the carryover from Dr. Lytle, which is the pipes that were sized in the Delta Water Supply Project, were they for the intake structure and the raw water pipeline, were they sized that way only in anticipation of water that might become available under application 30531B?
Yeah, if I could take a step back and kind of summarize the entire water supply plan for the Delta Water Supply Project is based on the original application of 160 million gallon per day water use into the future. And so when we were developing the project, it's very difficult to get a permit to construct an intake in the Delta, as you might imagine. And that was a monumental effort. So at the time, we took that 160 million gallon per day and split it in half and said, let's build an 80 MGD intake currently under the first phase of the project and install the fish screens that would accommodate an 80 MGD diversion. And then in the future, many years down the road, we would then go back to the permitting process to install the other half of the intake structure, the other 80 MGD. So that was the concept of how the intake structure would be constructed and built. But when it comes to the ability to pump and convey raw water to the water treatment plant, we looked at sizing that raw water pipeline accordingly. And from the lower, when the project would first start up, you're pumping at low rate, and demand, meeting demand. You want to ensure that you have adequate velocity in that pipeline to keep it clean, essentially, so it doesn't silt up. So the concept behind the sizing of that pipeline, we decided on a 60 million gallon per day maximum pipe size, not the 80 to correspond with the intake structure, but 60 MGD would be the proper size for that initial pipeline. And that was, part of that overall 160 MGD approach, which is a combination of 1485 water and 11460 water. So to answer your question, yes, it was contemplated that water that would be used to get to 60 MGD would be part of that would be 11460 water.
Okay. And this is also this was my first kind of question for you before the pipeline, kind of a bigger, maybe theoretical question, which is, you've described in your testimony a lot of uncertainty around water supplies. So is there a reason that the city would not want to continue using those uncertain water supplies and just switch sooner to water that would be made available under this permit? Because you've described that Stockton East, climate change, COVID, there's many uncertainties. So would it make sense to accelerate use of water under this permit so that you could potentially have a more certain supply?
Yeah, I think, the city looks at all of their supplies that are currently available and the infrastructure that's been invested to harness that supply and put it to use. The city has been a partner in the Stockton East Water District. In fact, the city, county, and the California Water Service Company made the investment in the water treatment plant at Stockton East, and that's been the primary source of surface water for the metropolitan area for many, many decades, and is contemplated to continue that into the future. But with that wholesale water contract coming up for termination in 2035, you always have to be looking ahead, because planning doesn't happen overnight. It takes decades. And so the city has continued to look at the 11,460 water and maximizing the Delta water supply over time, regardless of what happens with current supplies, but on a 5-year increment, looking at those supplies and determining, are they less reliable today than they were 5 years ago? What will it look like 5, 10, 20 years from now? So the city continues to use water that has been purchased and contracted for in the past, but is always looking to the future and not, ignoring what is currently available, but planning for the eventuality that those supplies won't be there in the future. So I think it's a smart way to do it. It's to continue to look into the future and knowing that there's an application on file. City needs to maintain that, because you never know when it may need to be exercised. And we've tried to lay out a reasonable timeline of when that would be based on those supply uncertainties.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Granberg, you've also, I guess, Ms. Mullen, could we pull up Stockton Exhibit 2, Mr. Granberg's testimony, and go back to page 6, please? So Dr. Granberg, this table is very helpful. One thing I'm missing from it, though, is the current demand. And I noticed, is that figure going to be in the urban water management plan? I have a figure from the urban water management plan, but I just wanted to see if there's no 2020 column, obviously, because 2020 is past, but do you happen to know that number, or do you know what the city's current water demand is?
I'd have to go back to the urban water management plan. I know
Okay.
This is projected from 2025
Right.
from the urban
Right.
water management plan. I would guess it's a little bit less than that 34,789, but I don't have the number.
Yeah, I just wanted to see if if you could confirm if that's my best bet, or if you knew that figure. It was 34,404. So you're right, just a little smaller. Okay, just kind of double checking that there.
Sure.
So Ms. Mullen, we can take this exhibit down, please. I wanted to also ask some questions about the city's contract with the Stockton East Water District. So you've provided some testimony about this. So to confirm, do you believe the city has a right of renewal on its second amended contract with Stockton East?
Yes, I do believe that. And in
Okay.
fact, that was contemplated in the city's urban water management plan, but not in the Stockton East urban water management plan.
Okay. And then does the city plan to exercise its right of renewal?
That's the plan today. As I said in the testimony, we're a willing party. We have been with Stockton East Water District since 1987, when the original contract was executed, or the second amended contract was executed. It's contemplated that water will be there, and the city will continue to contract for that water. But when we get to 2030 or 2031, whenever those negotiations start, it's hard to say, and you've got to plan for the worst and hope for the best. So it is contemplated that there would be a continuation of that contract, and in fact, the contract does provide for that while the parties continue to negotiate. So.
Okay, but you're planning in your testimony and in table 1 that Stockton East will not be providing water after 2035. That's based on, can you summarize again what the basis is for that?
That's kind of a worst case scenario. What if the negotiations fail? What if Stockton East finds another willing buyer for that water. I don't know. I don't know what their position might be at that time, but if that supply is lost, how does that look for the application of Part B water in order to meet demand? So that was the purpose of Table 1.
Right. And there's no documents or other indication that you have that Stockton East is not planning to provide this water. You are hopeful that everything's going to continue in 2035.
The only thing I have is what was stated in their 2020 urban water management
Right.
plan.
Right. Besides that, yes. Okay. I wanted to ask a similar question, I guess, about the Woodbridge Irrigation District contract. Do you have a right of renewal with their contract? I know it expires in 2048.
Yes, I believe so. Again, I don't have it in front of me, but during the time of negotiating that contract, that was contemplated.
And as far as you know, the city would plan to exercise its right of renewal with Woodbridge Irrigation District.
I believe so. I mean, 2048 is a long time from now, but I would imagine they're a very willing partner, and the city has a great relationship with the Woodbridge Irrigation District. And as long as we have two willing parties, I would imagine they would continue that contract. But again, it's, at that point in time, what are the terms of that extension?
Right. So you're thinking about worst case scenarios, it sounds like.
Correct.
Okay. Ms. Mullen, could we put Stockton 2 back on the screen, please, and take a look at paragraph 11, which is on page 5. Thank you very much. So, Mr. Granberg, let me move my pictures there. So I'm looking at line 6. It says, it indicates in this paragraph that the city could receive some additional 6,500 acre feet of water a year. And I believe this is also reflected possibly in your table 1. And it looks like there's certain conditions that would need to be met. And then at the end of this paragraph, lines 11 and 12, you say, however, the potential development that underlies this additional supply is uncertain. It looks like the city is counting on this additional 6,500 acre feet as part of its water supply. Can you talk a little bit about how you're kind of balancing the uncertainty of these conditions being met for the additional water, but also counting on that water?
Sure. As the contract states, there's a provision for expanding that water from Woodbridge an additional 3 acre feet per acre based on conversion of Woodbridge ag land currently served by Woodbridge to urban use. And that's the additional 6,500 acre feet would be available. And this is all predicated on the city's general planning at the time and whether or not lands north of what's considered 8 Mile Road is that current limit, whether or not those lands would then convert to urban use. And with that would come the additional water from Woodbridge. And that was contemplated to happen in 2030 as just an assumption at that time.
Okay. Okay. And then I wanted to, Ms. Mullen, can we scroll back to page 7, I think, which has the table 1. Mr. Granberg, I wanted to, page 6. I wanted to ask about some assumptions in the table. So again, thank you for your explanation of it because it was very helpful. I'm wondering if there was a reason or what the reason was for, in the last 2 rows, the groundwater being limited to 10% of demand. Can you explain why you picked 10% as opposed to 5% or some other way to limit that amount there?
That's a good question. Based on my experience, the city has been able to provide 90% of demand from surface water supplies and 10% from groundwater. The 10% is, it's been proven that the city could get to that level of limitation on groundwater use. And could you go lower? Well, maybe, but slightly lower. It's all dependent upon the city's and ability to move that water, the surface water around the distribution system. There are limitations on moving surface water into certain parts of the distribution system that are currently and historically been served by groundwater wells. And so the assumption is that you probably could get, well, the city has proven it can get to 10% of groundwater use meeting demand based on the distribution system. And with improvements to the distribution system and eliminating some of the choke points and being able to move that water, that number could be driven down slightly, which would be more protective of the groundwater basin, but would require additional surface water supply. So it's an assumption that has been shown to be achievable and a reasonable assumption going forward, that there will always be some limited amount of groundwater use just to meet demand based on the distribution system configuration and limitations.
Okay, thank you very much. And then my last question for you is, you mentioned that there has been an uptick in demand due to COVID. Do you have any more information about that, or have you been able to look at any? I know data is probably changing all the time and it's still so new, but can you expand on that a little bit more?
I think it's just, through the 2020 Urban Water Management Plan, the city looked at each and every year demand from the prior Urban Water Management Plan in 2015. And it was shown that there was a slight uptick in water use per capita. And that's been attributed to, a couple things, I believe. One is that more people are staying home to work and more water is being used because of that. And I think it's also a reflection of, in the late 2017, 2018, there was the water situation improved. There was more rain. People were probably more confident in going back to their prior, how they used water prior to the drought. So there's some relaxation, I believe, in that in water use, which translates into more demand on the system. And just a combination of it's all in how people use water, and what are the variables in that? Is it hydrology? Is it economics? Is it people just becoming more accustomed to going back to the way they used water in the past? It's always changing, and I think it's reflected here in the table, and the city will continue to look at it on an annual basis, culminating in that Urban Water Management Plan update that will happen in 2025, and they'll have a new number at that time.
Yes. Okay. Thank you very much, Ms. Mullen. We can go ahead, and I'm finished with using Stockton Exhibit 2. Thank you very much. And I'm going to ask my staff if anyone has any questions, if they don't mind going off of mute. I'm getting a message, so I'm going to ask Mr. Wooldridge if you wanted to pose any questions.
Yeah, I have a question for Mr. Granberg about that table. So sorry, Nicole, could you put that back up? Okay, so first off, this first row here, DWSP 1485. So what's the source of water for this diversion? Is it just limited to the A permit, or is there other sources?
This is the A permit, which is based on Water Code 1485, which says that if you treat wastewater to all regulatory requirements and you discharge it to the San Joaquin River, that you're entitled to divert a like amount out of the river for treatment and M&I use.
Okay, and that wastewater comes from originally, for this, let's say the 2025 column, the purchase water from WID or from SEWD and groundwater? Is it limited to those?
Yeah, the way we look at this is there's an overall demand for the metropolitan area, not just the city of Stockton as a utility, but also from the Cal Water service area and county service areas. And that all translates into a wastewater flow to the wastewater treatment plant, which is owned and operated by the city of Stockton. So it's collecting water from not just its own water service area, but these other water service areas.
Okay.
And it treats that water and then discharges that to the river.
So the wastewater treatment plant isn't limited to just the surface water supply that is delivered and used in the city of Stockton.
Not limited to the water that's used in the city of Stockton's water utility service area. The metropolitan area, as I stated before, is served by the city of Stockton, the California Water Service Company, and San Joaquin County has two service districts, water service districts, but they all discharge wastewater to the sewer system that ultimately gets to the city's wastewater treatment plant.
Okay, and so the numbers in this first column then say that the 20, then the first for 2025, you've got 23,400 acre feet. And is that based on the reduced flows from the biological opinion and the incidental take permit?
Yes.
And that's from 33,000 acre feet?
33,600 acre feet was what was permitted under 2176, but it's limited by the ESA restrictions that were the subject of the biological opinions and incidental take permit. Correct.
Okay. So then if we move over to 2035, in this table, you've assumed that the Stockton East Water District contract has expired and not been renewed. So just looking at kind of the inputs from the city, you've got the purchased water from WID, and then you've got groundwater. And if we're looking at the scenario where you limit the groundwater to 10% of demand, then that allows for 845 acre feet to be beneficially used under a potential B permit, right?
Correct.
So I guess I just, what I'm wondering is there enough original water coming out of the wastewater treatment plant without those surface water, without the 24,000 acre feet coming from Stockton East and the 23,000 acre feet, which you originally have for the groundwater diversions? Now you've reduced that groundwater to 4,000 acre feet. So just looking at the city's water supplies, we're at 17,000 acre feet. And you've got 25,000 acre feet being diverted under the A permit. So is that going to be offset with other sources?
Yeah, well, it's all to meet demand on that bottom row there. So that's the projected demand in each of the 5-year increments. And so subtract that from that, the current supply is available in each of those years and what is needed to be able to meet that demand. If all groundwater is available, you're fine, you're meeting demand. But if you limit groundwater to 10%, then you're going to need additional surface water to be able to do that. And that all translates into water that would, or any water that would come through Part B would then translate into water that would go through the wastewater treatment plant. So it's kind of a combination of Part B and Part A. When does it become Part A? Well, once it goes through the wastewater treatment plant.
Okay, I guess, maybe it doesn't matter as these are projections. I've just, from this table, I'm not seeing that there's enough original supply of water that going through the wastewater treatment plant to even meet demand under the A and B permit.
Well, there's water coming through the wastewater treatment plant that comes from other sources, and that's
right.
The California Water Service Company system and the county system.
Okay.
And they're getting their supply from the Stockton East Water District.
Right. Okay. And are there plans to increase the capacity, or is the capacity higher for the wastewater treatment plant?
The capacity of the wastewater treatment plant is being reduced slightly to better maximize the infrastructure needed to treat the flows that it's currently seeing. Today, I believe the wastewater plant is rated for 55 MGD, if I'm not mistaken. But it doesn't see that on a regular basis, on an annual basis. So the new facilities to treat for the nitrate plus nitrite are being sized to cost effectively treat the flow that the wastewater plant sees.
Okay. And what does that MGD translate to in acre feet per year? Do you happen to know? I don't have my spreadsheet.
Yeah, not off the top of my head. I probably should. And maybe I could rely on Dr. Lytle to reflect what the capacity of the wastewater plant project is. But I believe it's 40 MGD or 38 MGD, something like that. But I'm taking a guess here. So.
Okay. Well, that's all the questions that I have for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wooldridge. So I think those are all the questions from the AHO. Mr. Ferguson, do you have any redirect questions?
Yeah, I would like to give Mr. Granberg an opportunity to maybe elaborate in response to Mr. Wooldridge's question related to table 1. I believe he asked a question or raised the question about not knowing if there were enough supplies to be able to generate Part A water in table 1. And so, Mr. Granberg, can you maybe elaborate a bit more about the nature and extent of the sources of supply that ultimately feed the wastewater treatment plant? And I'm wondering if figure 2 in Mr. or Dr. Lytle's testimony may be helpful in explaining that as well. So.
Well, I'll start. Maybe if we can get that figure up on the display for everyone's benefit. But the Stockton's wastewater plant is called the Stockton Regional Wastewater Control Facility. So it's a regional facility that serves not just the city of Stockton's water utility, but all of the water utilities that are supplying water for M&I use in the metropolitan area. So it's the green, the tan, and then the darker tan or brown areas within the north part of the city of Stockton. Now, let me take a step back. So this figure shows the water utility systems that supply water to the metropolitan area. So you have the green area, which is the city of Stockton water utility that's owned and operated by the city of Stockton through the Municipal Utilities Department, led by Dr. Lytle. So the city of Stockton has the north area, the south area, and then there's a couple of small service areas within the Cal Water system that supplies the Diamond Walnut processing plant and a small urban residential development right there at the intersection of Highway 4 and Highway 99. The light tan color there is the California Water Service Company water service area. Historically, they were the original water supplier for the metropolitan area. And when the city came into being, they took over the north and south. The county has retained 2 water service districts that are completely surrounded by the city of Stockton system, and they obtain their water through the city of Stockton system. Similarly, the Walnut plant and the small residential development there that I mentioned previously is served by the City of Stockton Water Utility. They're City of Stockton customers, but the water comes through the California Water Service Company distribution system. So there's a lot of interaction amongst the urban contractors on moving water through our systems to serve others. We have interconnects between our systems for reliability purposes and the ability to move water from one area to another. So the surface or the water supply sources for the urban contractors, which are the three entities, is the Stockton East Water District primarily. Stockton East Water District operates a water treatment plant there in the east part of the city and has three major transmission lines, one to the north serving the City of Stockton, one to the central part of the city serving the California Water Service Company, and one to the south serving the City of Stockton's south area. Surface water supplies are supplemented by groundwater use. So each of the entities, City of Stockton and Cal Water, have their own groundwater wells and system that they operate. The county system no longer has groundwater wells. They solely rely on the City of Stockton to convey their contracted water from Stockton East and whatever makeup is needed from the city's system, be it groundwater or Delta water supplies. So all of that supply to meet the entire metropolitan area demand, which is, I think it's somewhere around 60,000 acre feet, maybe currently. I don't have that number in front of me, but that water supplies the entire metropolitan area, and a portion of that water is then conveyed through the wastewater system. And it's roughly about 47% of the entire water supplied to the metropolitan area ends up at the wastewater treatment plant for treatment. So once that water is treated, it's discharged to the river. The city then, through its 1485 water right, then diverts that water for treatment and distribution to its own customers. There's currently no plan. There is a mechanism, but no plan for Cal Water to utilize that water into their system. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One is incompatibility because of the chlorine situation, disinfection situation. And also we're limited by the distribution capabilities of moving a large amount of water into Cal Water. Cal Water is, as I said, they're a contractor to the Stockton East Water District, and they have supplemental groundwater wells to meet demand. And that's how we come up with that total amount of water that is treated at the regional water control facility that's owned and operated by the City of Stockton.
Thank you.
Does that answer your question or clarify
Yes.
that?
That's the only question I have, Ms. Nyes.
Okay, thank you very much. So Mr. Ferguson, would you like to move the City of Stockton's exhibits into evidence?
Yes, I would, please.
Okay, and are there any objections from anyone? Okay, hearing none, Stockton exhibits 1 through 25 are accepted into evidence. And then we're also going to move what we're calling the AHO exhibits into the evidentiary record. So we prepared an Excel spreadsheet with these exhibits. I think there's 117. So these are then publicly available and they're on the FTP site. So at this time, I'm going to check if there's any objections to moving AHO exhibits 1 through 17 into the evidentiary record. Okay, hearing nothing, I will accept these exhibits, and they're again all in the City of Stockton application 3051B folder in the hearing documents folder. So we set a deadline for rebuttal. I don't know if any party is going to have rebuttal, but I'll just ask if any party wishes to provide any rebuttal evidence. Okay, not hearing anything from any party. So I'm going to thank everyone today. I think we're almost finished. I do have one housekeeping item before I make some comments about closing briefs, and I don't see Mr. Cody still on the call. We have not received the policy statement that he sent, so we will follow up with him separately to ask him if he could resend that. Are there any other procedural concerns or comments before we talk about closing briefs and finish up? Okay, we don't see any hands up. So per the pre-hearing order of October 1st, 2021, the closing briefs are due November 23rd by 12 noon. If you want to cite to today's recording, please cite to the Zoom recording, which will be available shortly on our FTP site. This is the official record, as I mentioned, and the closing briefs should answer the questions on pages 7 and 8 of the hearing notice. So once those briefs come in, that starts the statutory clocks for our office to prepare a proposed order to submit to the board. So that's all I have. I wanted to thank our witnesses. This was very helpful. This was a lot of good information. I want to thank all the attorneys and others who participated today for your professionalism and courtesy. And I look forward to receiving your closing briefs on November 23rd. And this hearing is now adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.